If we could just go inside of our brain and take a look inside and see all of these nerve connections that we built in our brain, that over time we collected all of these myths and some truths throughout our life. And if we could look and see the connections that are built through every nerve fiber in our body, because our nerves, just like our blood vessels, travel to all of our organs and affect all of our organs. We are uniquely made, and that our thoughts have a lot to do with our state of being, our physical, internal environment, as well as our external environment. This is Tamika Chambers with Create a Generational Love Cycle. And the reason why we focus on the positive is because that's what we want to have. We want to have positive things in our life. So it's not about breaking, the title isn't breaking the generational love cycle, although my purpose is to break the cycle by creating a generational love cycle. And there are a few points that I like to share with you today on November 8, 2021. This is the only November 8 that we get. And so we want to make this, like every day, the best day of our life, regardless of what we've been through. That changing our internal wiring that we have can change our lives for the better. And so one of the things that I realize is that often people think because family history becomes family destination, becomes your destination in life. So family history becomes your destination in life because sometimes we feel that because my aunt went through something, my aunt maybe lost a leg because she had diabetes or a little sugar, as they used to say back in the day. Or my grandmother lost her eyesight, or my mother had ulcers, stomach ulcers, or GI problems. And so because we have learned and seen the traumatic effects of disease, how it really can rip away at the body and the mind and lead to depression and anxiety and sleepless nights. And as a child, you may have been one that grew up in that environment, and somehow that got internalized in your mind, thinking because someone has gone through something is because I have to go through it. And that is not the truth at all. That I remember when I took the drive, I made the drive to Memphis, Tennessee. And I finally wanted to go and see the rest of the other side of my family because my mother raised us, a single parent. And I went and I learned a lot about the other side of the family having heart disease, diabetes, stroke. And I remember thinking I did not want to experience that. Of course, by then I had medical knowledge. I was a nurse, working nurse at that time. And I just didn't feel like that I should have to live my life the way that somebody else is. And let me explain that a little bit deeper than that, right? And so the day that I ran out of the house when one of the male family members that sexually abused me for 5 years, approximately, I ran out of the house. I said no. And I saw the left side of him was free. And I said no, and I ran out the house. When I actually leaped off our porch, I saw that I felt like I'd entered another dimension. That everything in our garden had the plants my mother had, the mother-in-law tongue, everything glistened with color. And I felt like I was in a different place, a different path. And that day I realized, even though I would continue to struggle with my voice in some reasons, with confidence, that I realized my voice meant something, that my no meant something, that we didn't have to continue to do something, because for so long I felt imprisoned in an experience that I did not put myself in a group, that family member forced me to become part of a club, a group that I didn't want to be in. I did not want to be in the dark of sexual abuse, but I spent years in that. And I realized then that day when I said no, the birth of prevention, the seed of prevention took root in my mind. It planted itself, and over time it would continue to grow and foster in my mind. And so one of the things that my mom always told us is that, or often told us, is that you, just because someone goes through something or does something doesn't mean you have to, right? And I had two other brothers, and sometimes they get caught up in stuff, and I would see that come to fruition, that, when you get caught up in what other people are doing, and even in my own life, you realize, oh, wait a minute, I don't have to do what they do. And my mom would use that story, like, if someone jumped off a bridge, which you probably heard, would you do the same thing? And I would think to myself, I don't want to jump off a bridge and kill myself, or be swimming in a lake and trying to swim out. So that was another seed that planted in my subconscious, my internal mind, is that I didn't have to experience what others experience. And so I didn't find out about chronic health conditions or even consequences to sexual abuse until I was like in my 20s. And by that time, I had taken so much in the Bible, reading the Bible, learning the Lord's Prayer, learning about Jesus Christ, the character of a man that was on here on a mission and had the conviction of truth to keep him focused on his mission. And so I had spent years building that foundation within myself. And I share that that's another time, another story, as far as that. But what I really wanted to point out, one of the points, is that just because someone goes through something, we see something, or because statistics tell us that we have to be this way, or there many people experience this, or someone tells you, well, you're depressed, aren't you, because you went through child abuse, or your anxiety is, you're anxious, right? Or you have GI problems, does your stomach hurt, or you having problems sleeping, sometimes. And I learned about that in nursing school. As I went through nursing school, I learned about not only chronic health conditions and diseases and illnesses, but I also learned key terms that continue to plant into my inner garden about self-actualization, Maslow's self-actualization. I learned about resiliency. I learned about growing old gracefully. I learned about Pavlov's conditioning. I learned so much about the characteristics that I wanted to continue to reinforce in my life. And one of the things that the nursing instructor said to me was that many nursing students, once they go to school, they start thinking they have the conditions, right? And so, yes, sometimes I did think that, but there was another side of me that didn't want me to identify too deep with the condition. That even if, when I did wonder if I had something, there were doctors, my mother, who didn't want us to take on this victim personality, that would say, oh, I have it too. I have bumps, mom, on my arm. Oh, I have it too. It was like, well, shoot, she didn't want you to think that something was wrong with you when I think about that. And so nursing opened that door, not only to what can happen. And I also started seeing that when I started working as a nurse, I started seeing not only treating the physical conditions, but I started hearing many of the emotional, the background under these physical conditions, that people would talk about their childhood and how their mother treated them and how their father treated them, that I started to think about, was there a relationship between their emotional trauma, childhood trauma, and what they were experiencing now. Many of them being frequent visitors in the hospital. And so I wondered about that. And then I started reading while I was spending time in St. Louis, and I had my own apartment. I started reading books like by Louise Hay and You Can Heal Your Life. I started reading Eckhart Tolle and Dr. Phil and Gary Zukav, and they planted seeds in my mind to say there is more to life than the physical conditions, that we are more than our body. And so I realized that pain actually comes from believing we have to be somebody or do something or live a certain way because others have done it. They have lived that way. And often it's our elders, our parents, our coaches, our sisters, our brothers. We end up taking in another's identity because we're so intimately connected to one another, because there is a supreme power in the universe that keeps the sun, keeps us rotating around the sun, the planet, and keeps the stars in alignment, the mountains separated from the ocean. There's this one power, and there's a uniqueness between us that is so easy to pick up another's energy, another's way of life. And still realizing that God made us, we are uniquely made for our journey, for our earthly journey. We are perfectly made. And that love comes from, when we talk about creating a generational love cycle, love comes from believing we are our own person. We are co-creators with the infinite power, this higher power, this spirit with capital S, and that we are not these conditions, these diagnoses, another way of labeling people into something. And labels are those stickers that say you are not this, but you are this. And I've heard so many stories of people healing themselves and read so many stories, and even in my life, seeing things to come true when I took care of my son. And I realized that after doing all that, I didn't catch the flu. I had gone through my life thinking that, oh shoot, when I'm around somebody a cold, I'm going to get it. And sure enough, I would get the flu or whatever it was. But this time around, and I contributed to green tea and kale, which may have definitely had an effect on my immune system. But I tell you what tends to have the greatest effect is what we believe, what I believed, that my son was important, that I was going to get him together, and I wasn't even worried about being sick. I didn't even think about it. Taking him to the doctor's office and being in the car with me and being at his bedside, giving him Tylenol and soup and all of that stuff until after that. And then I was like, oh, I didn't get sick. Even if I felt something, it went away because I felt like I couldn't get sick. I didn't want to get sick. And then when we moved into our house and I was feeling stressful, and I'm thinking, oh shoot, I haven't been eating my kale, I haven't been eating my green tea. Well, guess what happened? I ended up catching a bug that I was coughing. It was 3 weeks in the winter. Almost everybody had it. Fever off and on, end up getting pneumonia. And I was sick, but my mind had that sickly role. I was thinking sick. I was thinking victim and victim thoughts. And recently I've felt like something was coming on me, and I said, you know what? I can't get sick. I can't afford it. And before you know it, that warm feeling that I had, that feeling that you get when you feel like you're going to get sick, like you start feeling congested, that went away sitting here at my desk after I made that conviction, that confirmation that I needed to be well. And so I know that, and I was researching trauma, chronic trauma, or childhood trauma, and it could be anything. It could be physical, sexual, emotional, childhood sexual abuse, if divorce, death of a parent or a loved one, all those traumas. And often there is some biochemical change process that occurs within us. And out of that, we have those emotions, because even though they may have different titles or labels, those emotions like anger, betrayal, confusion, purpose, identity, meaning of life, that somehow those are shaken up a bit. And this biochemical, I believe, transaction that occurs at the minute level of atoms, that somehow it interferes with our fantastic body's ability to maintain balance. And out of that, of course, there probably more that's involved in it, but out of that comes these rare conditions, these diabetes and heart disease. And I remember Les Brown saying that he had read that many people, that the most heart attacks that takes place are on Monday mornings when people are going to work, because often we're doing something that we don't love. We're doing something because out of tradition, out of what we believe we should be doing, working for our families, putting in umpteen hours, making this much money, and our families are struggling. We're struggling with our health. The obesity raises are rising, diabetes among the children and among older adults in their 40s, that numbers of health conditions continue to rise because of all this stuff. I believe this stuff that we've identified with, that we've made it a part of our programming, our identity, that it brings about these chronic health conditions. It brings about the PTSD, the nightmares, the stress, the abdominal GI conditions, the heart disease, the cancer. Because if we've identified with all this potentially quote unquote bad, terrible, traumatic things, then the message that we're sending to our body, or that becomes part of our body, why should I live? So when we think about these physical conditions underneath, these emotional conditions, these biochemical conditions are taking effect inside of our body. But even the Bible says there is another way. There is another way, and that way is making love our framework. It's making love what we stand on, realizing that we're all here for a purpose, realizing that just because someone goes through something doesn't mean I have to go through it, realizing that the first step to healing our body, and it's often I've heard in stories, is realizing I don't have to be sick. I don't have to take on that identity. I've had anxious moments, and I've also had moments when I said, I can't do that. Whatever it is that I need to face, I need to face. And that's by acknowledging our truths. Often we look up to our parents to show us a way, show the elders, my uncles. We look up to people to show us how to live, instead of looking within, believing and trusting in ourselves, believing in a higher power, believing our life has purpose, believing that our body is the vehicle for our message, believing that we have a divine message to give, believing that no experience changes who we are. It is what we identify with that often changes the biochemical program that we somehow put inside of ourselves. We can create a generational cycle of love, but it has to start within. It has to start within by, again, acknowledging our truths and what we had, and the disappointments and the frustrations and what we experienced, accepting our past, that it has happened. There's nothing we can do to change our past. There is nothing we can do to change what our father, our mother, our aunts, uncles, grandmother went through. There's nothing we can do to change the Egyptians' way of life. There's nothing we can do to change Adam and Eve. If you believe in the story of Adam and Eve and the beginning of the world. There's nothing we can do to change that, but there is everything we can do to change what we believe about ourselves and about life. There's everything we can do to help ourselves achieve and sustain optimal health and wellness. There's everything we can do to say, you know what? No more. I need to live my life. I need to accept my life and know that I am here for a purpose. I believe in who I am. I believe there are no mistakes about who I am and that I am here for a reason. That's how we create a generational cycle of pain. The foundation of acceptance, acknowledgement, and transforming our pain into light, to brighten our light. This is Tamika Chambers with Create a Generational Love Cycle. Today is November 8, 2021. How is this day going to be different from yesterday? If you're blaming somebody for the past, if you're blaming somebody for the pain that you are currently feeling, is it making it better? Is that blame making it better? Think about where you are today, where you want to be tomorrow, and what can you do to close the gap? Because no one else can do it for you but you. We have the help. We have infinite power that wants us to recognize who we are, who we truly are, and realize how, like the Course of Miracles says, how powerful we are. You can find information about how the 5 steps that I use to help me on my spiritual journey from childhood sexual abuse at TamikaSChambers.com. I am on Twitter and Instagram, and I just thank you for this. I'm so thankful for this opportunity to speak. Thank you so much for listening. If you feel that someone can benefit from this message that I shared with you today, that you listened to, please send it out. Because the more we have people understanding that we are greater than our experiences, that we can change what we've been, we can change the path that we're on, and we could definitely do it for the generations to come. Until next time, Tamika Chambers. See ya. Well, look forward to talking to you next time. Bye.